First Blood is the film that turned a broken Vietnam veteran into one of the biggest action heroes in cinema history. But the version you saw in theaters was almost a completely different movie. Did you know Rambo was originally supposed to die in the final scene, and Stallone himself fought to change it? Or that there was a real American soldier named Rambo who served in Vietnam and never came home? Today, we're uncovering 16 hidden truths about First Blood 1982. Including how this film helped turn a national wound into a conspiracy theory that millions of people still believe today. Number 1. First Blood's alternate ending. If you've seen First Blood, you know how it ends. Rambo has his emotional breakdown in front of Colonel Troutman, played by Richard Crenna. He collapses, he surrenders, and Troutman walks him out of the police station, alive. It's a powerful ending. A broken man finally letting go. But here's the thing. That ending, that's not the one director Ted Kotcheff wanted. He actually shot another version, the one he always intended to be the real ending of the film. And in that version, the scene starts the same way. Rambo breaks down. He's sobbing in front of Troutman. But then he notices the pistol hidden under Troutman's jacket, and he says, "You trained me, you made me, now kill me, you owe me that." When Troutman hesitates, Rambo reaches out, presses the barrel against his own stomach, and forces Troutman's hand to pull the trigger. Rambo dies. Troutman walks out in silence. Kotcheff later called the scene awfully moving and considered it the definitive ending of the film. But when test audiences saw it, the reaction was crushing. The problem wasn't just that Rambo died. It was that the ending made the movie feel hopeless, as if a damaged Vietnam veteran like Rambo had no way out except death. Stallone had already sensed this during production. He argued that after everything the film had put Rambo through, killing him at the end would be too much. So the survival ending became the version released in theaters. And that single decision to let Rambo live is the reason one of the biggest action franchises in cinema history exists at all. Number 2. The novel killed everyone. In the finished film, after escaping the manhunt, Rambo makes his way back into town, and the conflict finally returns to the police station. There, Sheriff Teasle is waiting for him. Teasle tries to shoot Rambo from the roof through the skylight, but Rambo fires back with the M60 and wounds him. Before Rambo can go any further, Troutman arrives and reminds him that the fight is over and there is no way out. Rambo breaks down emotionally, surrenders, and is taken into custody, while Teasle is taken away for medical treatment. But in David Morrell's original 1972 novel, the ending is far more brutal. After Rambo reaches the police station, Teasle does not go down as easily as he does in the film. Instead, Teasle catches Rambo by surprise and shoots him in the chest. Rambo still manages to fire back, and he shoots Teasle in the stomach, leaving both men fatally wounded. Then Colonel Troutman arrives, takes his shotgun, and ends Rambo's suffering by shooting him in the head. Rambo dies, and Teasle soon dies from his wounds as well. That is the key difference. In the film, both Rambo and Teasle survive, but in the novel, both of them die. Director Ted Kotcheff did not follow the novel's ending. He felt that the original ending did not fit his vision of Rambo, as he wanted the character to be portrayed more as a sympathetic victim of war trauma, rather than just a killing machine. David Morrell, the man who wrote that bleak ending, later said he actually preferred the film's version, because keeping Rambo alive led to sequels like Rambo: First Blood Part 2, which earned him millions in royalties. Number 3. The war hero behind Rambo. When Morrell created the character of Rambo, his primary real-world inspiration was Audie Murphy, the most decorated American soldier of World War II, with 33 awards, citations, and decorations to his name. Murphy's combat record was almost superhuman. His Medal of Honor citation reads, less like a military report and more like an impossible action scene. At Holzwihr, France, on January 26, 1945, Murphy held off a German attack while standing on a burning tank destroyer, an act of courage that became one of the most legendary moments of his military career. Even Morrell himself wrote, "Anything Rambo has done in any of the movies seems small compared to what Murphy actually did." But Murphy's life after the war was its own kind of tragedy. He suffered from severe untreated PTSD, plagued by nightmares, and became dependent on sleeping pills. Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971, just as Morrell was beginning to write First Blood. Murphy's death crystallized everything Morrell wanted to say about what happens to soldiers when the fighting stops. America's greatest war hero came home and received no help for the invisible wounds the war had left behind. Number 4. Stallone's biggest regret. There was a deleted scene in First Blood that would have changed the entire film. In it, Sheriff Teasle, played by Brian Dennehy, is revealed to be a Korean War veteran. The scene establishes that Teasle's hostility toward Rambo isn't just small-town cruelty. It's the resentment of a forgotten veteran looking at another veteran whose war became part of the national conversation. Teasle fought in Korea, a war that killed roughly 35,000 Americans but received almost no public acknowledgement afterward. From Teasle's perspective, Rambo represented the glamorous war, the one that dominated the national conversation, while his own sacrifice was completely forgotten. Without that scene, Teasle mostly comes across as a flat, abusive sheriff who targets Rambo for no deeper reason. With it, the film transforms into a conflict between two generations of veterans, each feeling abandoned in different ways. Stallone has called cutting this scene a major mistake. He told GQ, "The reason Teasle hated Rambo so much is because he had fought in the Korean War, and no one even thinks of the 35,000 people that died in the Korean War." That single scene would have turned a good guy versus bad cop story into something far more tragic and human. Number 5. The POW MIA conspiracy behind the sequel. In Rambo First Blood Part 2, Rambo is pulled out of prison and sent back to Vietnam to search for American POWs who might still be alive. On the surface, it plays like pure action movie wish fulfillment. But the story was drawn from one of the most emotional conspiracy theories in American history. After the Vietnam War ended, thousands of American servicemen were still listed as POW MIA, meaning prisoners of war or missing in action, with their fate never fully confirmed. For their families, those letters were not just military paperwork, they were open wounds. By the 1980s, many Americans believed the government knew some of those men were still alive in Southeast Asia, but refused to rescue them because admitting it would be politically devastating. Beau Gritz, a decorated Green Beret, even led unauthorized private missions into Laos trying to find prisoners he believed were still there. He never found any. First Blood Part 2 took that anger and grief and turned it into a powerful cinematic release. One man goes back to Vietnam, fights the system, and brings the forgotten soldiers home. For millions of viewers, Rambo made the idea of abandoned POWs feel less like a fringe theory and more like an obvious truth the government did not want people to know. However, in 1993, the Senate Select Committee on POW MIA Affairs concluded that there was no compelling evidence that any Americans were still being held alive in captivity. But by then, Rambo had already turned a national trauma into a myth an entire generation could believe in. So what do you think? Was there ever truth behind the POW MIA claims, or did Rambo help turn a national wound into a story people never wanted to let go? Number 6. The real soldier named Rambo. Morrell has said the name Rambo came from two sources: a variety of apple called the Rambo apple, and the French poet Arthur Rimbaud. But there's a third connection he has never publicly acknowledged. There was a real US soldier named Arthur J. Rambo who served in the Vietnam War. He never came home. His name is listed among the fallen. Morrell has never confirmed any intentional link between the real and fictional Rambo, but the coincidence is haunting. Whether it's coincidence or quiet tribute, the parallel adds a ghostly weight to the character that goes beyond anything on screen. Number 7. The epidemic in the opening scene. The very first scene of First Blood establishes something most action movies would never touch. Rambo arrives at a friend's home only to learn that his last surviving war buddy, a man named Delmar Berry, has died of cancer caused by Agent Orange exposure. This wasn't fiction. Agent Orange was a chemical herbicide sprayed by the US military in Vietnam to strip trees and dense jungle foliage of their leaves, exposing areas that could hide enemy troops. It contained dioxin, a highly carcinogenic compound that poisoned hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese civilians and tens of thousands of American veterans. When First Blood was released in 1982, the US government still had not officially acknowledged the link between Agent Orange and cancer. That admission wouldn't come until the Agent Orange Act of 1991, nearly a decade after the film came out. By opening with Delmar's death, First Blood immediately told its audience this was not a typical action movie. It was a film about what happens to soldiers after the government is done using them. Number 8. The knife that built an industry. Stallone didn't want a generic prop knife for Rambo. He personally selected Jimmy Lile, an Arkansas knife maker known as the Arkansas Knifesmith, to design a blade that would function as a real survival tool, not just something that looked good on camera. Lile forged a 9-inch clip-point Bowie blade from 440C high-carbon steel, a blade he claimed could cut through the fuselage of an aircraft. The handle wasn't solid metal. It was built like a small sealed tube with a removable cap. The compass was set into the cap, while the empty space inside the handle carried a tiny survival kit with matches, needles, thread, and fishing gear. If the cap was removed, the hollow handle could even slide onto a wooden pole, turning the knife into an improvised spear. Even the guard had a purpose. One end worked like a Phillips screwdriver and the other like a flathead screwdriver. After the film's release, survival-style knives flooded the market overnight. Lile produced only 6 knives for filming and just 100 numbered collector editions before his death in 1991. The Rambo knife became as iconic as the character himself, proof that a single well-designed prop can define a franchise as much as any line of dialogue. Number 9. Neither man is the hero. Most people remember First Blood as a story about an innocent veteran persecuted by a corrupt small-town cop. But a growing reinterpretation of the film, especially among those who have read Morrell's novel, argues that neither Rambo nor Teasle is the good guy. Look at the facts within the film itself. Teasle's ego won't let him back down from a confrontation he started. But Rambo deliberately walks back into town after being warned away, and he refuses to cooperate with the deputies before his PTSD is even triggered. Colonel Troutman himself says it plainly, "You did some pushing of your own." In this reading, both men are stubborn warriors who escalate a trivial confrontation into a war because neither one will yield. This reframing turns First Blood from a simple action movie into something closer to a tragedy. What's your read on this? Is Rambo purely an innocent victim, or did he play a part in his own destruction? Number 10. The prop nobody built. One of the most memorable survival moments in the film is when Rambo finds a large piece of rotten canvas in the woods and cuts it into a makeshift coat. But that canvas wasn't a prop built by the art department. It was an actual piece of rotten canvas the crew stumbled across during filming in the British Columbia wilderness. Since there was only one piece, it became unexpectedly precious on set. There was no backup, no replacement. If anything happened to it during a take, they couldn't reshoot the scene the same way. After production wrapped, Stallone took the rotten canvas home and reportedly still has it to this day. A real piece of garbage, found in the woods, used once in a movie, and now kept as a personal treasure by one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Number 11. Hollywood's first look at PTSD. First Blood is widely recognized as the first mainstream Hollywood film to directly and centrally address what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder in Vietnam veterans. When the film was released in 1982, PTSD had only been added to the official psychiatric diagnostic manual 2 years earlier in 1980. The film depicts nearly every recognized symptom with striking accuracy: hypervigilance, social isolation, survivor's guilt, and explosive rage. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, approximately 30% of Vietnam veterans experienced PTSD in their lifetime. What makes this remarkable is that First Blood was marketed as an action movie. Audiences went in expecting explosions and gunfights. Instead, they got a clinically accurate portrayal of a psychological condition that most of the country had barely heard of. It reached more people than any medical textbook or government report ever could. Number 12. A town called Hope. The fictional town where Rambo is harassed and hunted is called Hope, Washington. And the real filming location was Hope, British Columbia, a small town about 95 miles east of Vancouver. That matching name wasn't a coincidence the filmmakers ignored. Khrushchev specifically chose to film in Hope and kept the town's real name for the fictional setting because the thematic irony was too perfect to pass up. Think about what that means for the story. Rambo arrives in a town literally called Hope, searching for his last surviving friend, searching for a reason to keep going. And what does he find there? The exact opposite. Hope is the place where hope is denied to him at every turn. The town's name quietly turns the entire film into a cruel metaphor that most audiences never even notice. Number 13. The deleted scene that changes everything. On May 12, 1985, NBC aired a television version of First Blood that included a scene never shown in the theatrical release, and that scene gives Rambo's story a much heavier meaning. At the very beginning of the film, before Sheriff Teasle ever sees him, Rambo walks into a local diner to buy some takeout food, but the cashiers refuse to serve him. When they finally do, they overcharge him for condiments. Rambo does not argue, he does not fight back. He simply gives up and leaves. That small moment changes the way you read the entire film. Without it, Teasle's harassment can look like one corrupt sheriff abusing his power. But with the diner scene, Rambo's rejection begins before Teasle enters the story. The town has already decided he does not belong there. That is why the deleted scene matters. The hostility is not just personal, it is systemic. The entire town wants Rambo gone. Number 14. Stallone's screams were real. For the scene where Rambo leaps off a cliff and crashes through tree branches, a stunt double handled the upper portion of the fall. But Stallone insisted on performing the bottom section himself, the final impact through the branches. On the way down, he hit a tree branch wrong and broke a rib. The scream of pain you hear in the finished film is completely real. Stallone wasn't acting. He later said on the DVD commentary that it was easy to scream in pain when playing the landing, since he was not acting and was really in pain. The injury happened during the second take of the fall. After that, Stallone was in too much pain to repeat the stunt, so the real scream captured on camera stayed in the final cut. That genuine cry of agony stayed in the final cut, and it's one of the reasons the scene feels so visceral. Because it is. Number 15. The prank that fooled a hospital. For the scene where Rambo stitches his own arm in the wilderness, the makeup team created an incredibly realistic prosthetic wound on Stallone's arm. The effect was so convincing that Stallone decided to test just how good it really was. During a lunch break, he walked into a nearby hospital still wearing the prosthetic and casually asked the nurses for some Tylenol to help with the pain. The nurses took one look at the wound and were horrified. They genuinely believed it was real. Not only did they rush to help him, they reportedly declared Stallone the toughest man they had ever met for walking around with what looked like a gruesome open wound and only asking for over-the-counter painkillers. Stallone had done the whole thing deliberately, just to see if the makeup would fool trained medical professionals. It did. Number 16. 76 million tickets in China. In 1985, First Blood became the first major Hollywood blockbuster to receive a theatrical release in China, a country that had been largely closed to Western cinema for decades. The film sold approximately 76 million tickets. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the population of a mid-sized European country, all buying tickets to watch a violent, R-rated American action film. That record for a foreign film in China stood for over 3 decades, until 2018. What makes that number even more extraordinary is what the film is actually about. First Blood isn't a celebration of American strength. It's a film about the American government abandoning its own soldiers and a broken veteran being hunted by his own countrymen. That response proved Rambo's story was not just an American wound. It was something audiences far beyond America could recognize. First Blood was never really an action movie. It was a country's guilty conscience put on screen. A question nobody wanted to ask: what do we owe the people we send to war? If this video changed how you see the film, drop a comment and tell us which fact hit you the hardest. And if you want more hidden truths behind the films that shaped a generation, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.